read this all to you. You guys can all, oh, there we go. We can record. So sweepstakes is a domestic contest. It's pretty easy if you spend the time to make an okay score. And sort of my sort of personal metric for that is about 100,000 points. You spend a fair amount of time in it. You put in the time. That's a pretty good, that's a pretty reasonable score. Um, it's much harder to sort of make hit the next milestone and really push it and make a huge score. And the first 8 or 10 hours is really fun because the rates are really high and you're running guys just as fast as you can. The last 12 hours can be just absolutely miserable, and it's really difficult. So it's really more like 2 or 3 contests baked into one. This is just a little outline of what I'm going to try to cover. This is a Florida specific presentation, so we'll talk about, ways that Florida is a little bit different from other parts of the country. A lot of the content that's out there, that's free from other clubs, is specific to the Mid-Atlantic. PVRC has a lot of content, or the West Coast, NCCC has a lot of their stuff available online as well. So this is a little bit different. We're in a little bit different spot. Where did it come from? Where did sweepstakes come from? 1929, December 1929 QST, they announced what they called the January contest, which was held over 2 weeks in January 1930. From the very beginning, you worked stations once per contest. You didn't work, there was no working people on other bands. In 1930, you had to exchange traffic. So you had to send preamble, the header. That's what we sort of send now in the sweepstakes exchange. But then you had to exchange messages with this station. So, and I think the winner made 40 Qs in 2 weeks or something like that. So, but there you go. So I talked about the exchange a little bit. It's an unusual exchange, an unusual contest, an unusual exchange because it's long. There's multiple elements. It's the only contest other than the sprint that sort of leaps to mind that has multiple distinct elements that can change from year to year. So these are the parts of the exchange: your serial number, that's pretty common; your precedence, which is you're announcing to everybody else your category with some granularity. The rules say that your call sign is a part of the exchange, so don't skip it. That has to go in there. The last 2 numbers of the year you were first licensed, which, despite the name, they do not check that. There's no policing that, so you can put any 2 numbers that you want in there. And then a section, and I had to look this up, there's now 85 sections. They keep increasing the number. The cynic might say to make it harder to get a clean sweep. And then this is just what these are just what the precedence figures mean. There's nothing magic about them. I think they picked them and then they've added on a few, later on, unassisted and school. So in any case, so these are some other, everybody can read the rules, but everybody works 24 out of 30 hours. The contest starts at 5 p.m. Eastern time, which is 2100 Zulu on Saturday, and it goes for 30 hours. So it goes over. That's another thing that makes it unusual. It goes over into Monday morning early UTC. You got to take at least 30 minutes off. That's important because if you go over your op time, then those QSOs that you make, they just chop those off for scoring purposes. This is one of the few contests where you'll hear people send QSO before, particularly early on, because the exchange is so long and it's hard to, you don't want to waste time sending an exchange again. So some people will send QSO before and try to run you off if you've duped them. If they're serious, just work them on Sunday. They won't be busy. N1MM and other loggers will sort of insert by default an RST 59 or 599 if you use the canned messages. You can take it out. It's not required. I mean, you can leave it in if you want, but it's not helpful. Um, you got to send your call sign. I touched on that before. You don't have to use the order that they publish in the exchange, but it's really a good idea. Otherwise, it gets kind of hairy. Um, and then if you send extra stuff, you say your number is, or, you say your check is 99 or your check is 63. Um, that's some people say that speeds things up and it gives people a chance to copy it with fewer mistakes. Um, I tend to think that it just takes time. Early on, you want to maximize the time that you're sending real information, and later on, you can do whatever you want. It's you've got a lot more free time on Sunday, but and then don't, this is sort of standard, but particularly if you're in phone, don't use cutesy phonetics, don't use, weird abbreviations, no need to send, extra zeros or anything. Just, keep it simple. Um, the exchange is complicated. It's not sacrilegious to practice it ahead of time, to say, you know, work through the exchange, make sure that you're saying it in the normal order. I'm going to touch on this. I've got a screenshot or two about the the N1MM Plus exchange parser. This is, worth paying attention to. And then on phone, particularly when I get tired, I find that I do this. And it's just because I'm trying to talk and sort of fill I want to fill out the exchange a little bit. So you say, thanks, thanks, Jim, for your 123 in Michigan, your number 129 in North Florida. It just makes it, with QRM and QRN and everything else, it makes it hard to make sure that you're accurately exchanging everything. You have to sort of force yourself to not do that if you can. It's easy to do. So touch on the strategies, hardware, software, and then some tips and tricks. I said before, it's a story of maybe 2 or 3 contests. I decided while I was writing this that it's sort of 3 contests. The first 8 hours are really fast. Again, you can push a lot of rate. You really want to prioritize work the loud guys first, copy everything you can the first time, pay attention to all the help that the software is trying to give you with history files and your own wetware and all that stuff. The middle hours are slower paced, but there's always a holdout section or two that you're chasing. Usually Sunday morning, people are looking for rare sections, unusual sections. There'll be, if you're on packet, guys are spotting and saying, where's the VE8 or where's the VO1 or whatever whatever turns out to be a rare section. And then the last third of the contest, it's just really slow. And every news station that gets on is just immediately swamped with a lot of assisted guys and some unassisted guys who are unassisted. Some guys who are, they just got bored and they turned on packet or, whatever. So there's, you'll tune around and there'll be, loud CQ, loud CQ, loud CQ, and this huge pileup on a guy who's not very loud, who's, running 100 watts, but he's fresh meat. So he's, running 100 watts on a wire, but he's fresh meat and he's drawn a huge pileup. So how do you score well? It goes without saying, you have to start strong. 7 to 8 hours. Some people say more like 10 hours. I don't know. I've never had much luck going much past about 8 or 9 hours, but reasonable people can disagree. The advice used to be, and I think W3LPL sort of popularized this, or at least he's the one I heard say it first, that you should start the contest in the first hour. You should just do search and pounce. Just go from band to band, search and pounce, and work as many guys as you can. I've tried that. I don't think that it's effective. I think that you're just working guys who are calling CQ, and they're going to be there. Most of them are going to be there the whole weekend. You do work a lot of different sections, and you can fill in the section map, but I think you need. I think there's a group. There's some number of people who are only going to be on for that first 6 or 8 hours, and you got to be calling CQ to work them. Um, and then this is I'll be a little bit controversial, but this last um, suggestion here, if you're following the rules, you're sending your call sign with every exchange. So part of your exchange is your call sign. So when you finish, if you're running, if for instance, if I'm running on phone and Stan calls me and I say K4SBZ number 151 Bravo W4WF 99 North Florida. And Stan responds and he gives me his exchange and he says, uh, number 253 Alpha K4SBZ. I don't know what year you were licensed, 73 North Florida. And I say, okay, thanks. If I've got a huge pile up, well, I just gave my call sign. I don't I don't have to give it again. Some people that's sort of controversial and it's not necessarily best practice to do that for a long time, but in sweepstakes, particularly early on when the rate's high, time is at a premium. So you've really got to work to make sure you're getting those cues in the log as fast as you can. So it is not unreasonable to finish that QSO and instead of saying thanks W4WF or you know thanks W4WF sweepstakes or something like that, just say thanks and unkey, or on CW send TU and just unkey and give it a second. If you've got a pileup, particularly if there were several guys calling you before, the ones that are sharp that are with it will pick up on that and they'll call you ahead of time and you'll be able to work through the pileup a little faster. I don't think ethically there's any problem because you're sending your call sign with every exchange. And uh, they know your call sign, you're identifying yourself. So anyway, I know that some people don't like that, and I've heard that I'm aware that that's a little bit controversial, but that's a strategy that can work. So this is a little look inside the first 7 hours or so.
I think with N1MM,
Yes.
you can type in a certain part of the exchange more than once. So you can
Yep.
copy the other guy's exchange, including his serial number. And then when he finally chooses you just copy in the serial number again.
Yep. I'm going to hit that in a slide or two. So that's definitely good. A good tactic when you're searching pounds. So the measure used to be, particularly in CW, can you do 100 an hour in sweepstakes? It's a long exchange. It's not trivial. I mean, not to pat myself on the back too hard, but I have done it a couple of times. Again, it's not trivial. You could do it for the first hour or two usually. And then if you get on late in the contest for, as fresh meat, you can do it then. That's when I've done it, to be totally candid. And it is helpful because you'll have, stuff that you miss and stuff that's, that's not there. That it is helpful to have a history file and check that against your own knowledge of, where people are and that sort of thing. So, but it is possible. So this is hardware. What makes a good sweepstakes station? It doesn't take huge hardware. W2GD, I say famously, he'll tell you all about it if you talk to him, if you ask him about it. But he won from a home station from Tribender. He had a station with a, 50-foot Tribender 50 feet in wires and won sweepstakes, beat everybody in the late 70s. And why is it possible to do that? Or why was it possible for him to do that? And why can you turn in a competitive score now with that kind of station? Because you don't need to be loud everywhere. You don't need to have a killer signal on every band. You just need to be loud somewhere on some band. And I guess it'd be more precise to say you don't need to be loud on every band. You need to be loud on one band. Um, so from Florida, what's a good signal or what's a good station in sweepstakes? A tribander, a spider beam, a quad, something like that at 30, 40, up to maybe 75 feet. A rotatable dipole on 40 is good. An inverted V or a dipole is better, or is okay as well. A Yagi on 40 is obviously really good, but that's not feasible for everybody. 80 meters, I'll touch on it a little bit later. 80 meters from Florida, not a big deal. An inverted V, something reasonable. You don't need to spend a bunch of time and energy and money and everything else to put a big signal on 80 for sweepstakes. It's pretty easy to be too high on 10 and 15. If you get up in the 100-foot range, you might be too high for 10 and 15. And when in doubt, what antennas should I have? What antennas should I invest more time and money and energy in? 20 and 40 from here. So this is the parser that Ken was talking about. So, and I'm going to hide this so I can see it. So this is a screenshot of the thing, and I worked in F4A, and I copied 9 United 65 North Florida, and I typed that in. And then he sent me a fill, and he said, no, it's 19. So instead of backspacing and deleting all that stuff and having to type it again, I just hit spacebar and started typing again. 19 United. And he said, no, it's not 65, it's 64. Oh, it's 64. And then, then he came back again and he said, no, it is 29A. So I've fixed it again. So you can see up here above that, above my serial number of 1, you can see in blue text 29A and F4A 64 NFL. Anything that you can keep typing in this exchange, this free form exchange field. I mean, functionally, it's unlimited. I've never run into the end. You can type call corrections. You can type, you can correct the check. You can correct the section. You can correct everything, every element of the exchange. The trick is you run the serial number and the precedence together. So that way, if you have a 1 or 2 digit serial number, you run it against the precedence so that the parser knows that's what it is. So that's why I put the 19U and then the 29A. And then you put you run the check and the section together. So 65 NFL. So if I had, typed in 64 WCF, then but then whatever's going to go in the log is in this blue text up here above the field. So I can see when I'm looking at it, that's what's going in the log. So if I'm not happy with that, and I looked it up later, his check is, I think, actually 62. Then you just hit spacebar and type 62, and it's going to fill that in. That is, I mean, I can't oversell how much better that is than the alternative. And this is the alternative, this is DX log, but that was just what I had on this PC. So you can see each one of these, or maybe you can't see, but I'll tell you, each one of these exchange elements is a different field, and you have to tab or space bar through them. So if you say, oh, he sent you an A, and you copied an A, and then you said, oh no, it's a U, then you have to tab or space bar back through all the other elements of the exchange to correct the precedence. And the same thing with every other element is its own field. That is simpler from a programming perspective, I'm sure, but it's not nearly as good it's not nearly as good from a user perspective. So again, the N1MM model, let me get back up to it. Where'd it go?
By the way, I wish N1MM would do that for other contests too. And am I wrong? Does it? For example,
I don't think it does. For what other contest would you want it done?
Well, any. It's just a pain in the ass to get over to the call sign field and to get your cursor in the right position to make a correction. If you could just retype in the call sign in the final, exchange field, and it would correct it, well, that would be wonderful.
I'll put it
I
in
mean,
as a
I
bug.
don't take it to the developers, I guess. I'm not, I'm not a software guy, but that would be, I mean, it would be handy. But in any case, this is what the N1MM exchange and ordinarily, and I'll go on. Um, ordinarily I don't want to advocate for one logger or one radio or one whatever over the other because you should use what makes you happy and you should use what you're comfortable with and all that stuff. But I'm not kidding. The parser, that exchange parser in N1MM Plus is so much better. If you run at all in sweepstakes, it's so much better for entering corrections than anything else that I think you should use it. It takes some practice and you want to, make sure that you understand how it works. But you just look at that little line of blue text, and you can change the size and the color and all that stuff. They've built a lot more flexibility into it than they used to. But by default, it's blue. It's above the window, and it'll show what you're going to log. So you just need to make sure that that matches what you're copying. And it's, again, I cannot undersell how good a feature that is. And we can thank, again, this is like a, digression, an unnecessary digression probably, but we can thank N6TR who put that into TR log now almost 40 years ago for that. That was a feature that that was exclusive to TR log, and then the N1MM guys brought it in, and it was always sort of niche with TR, and now it's much more common, but it's really good. And I think everybody should use it if they can, see their way clear to. So some other, this is, now we're hitting sort of shorter topics. Are conditions important? Oh yes, your flare can ruin your Sunday. That was sorry, supposed to be a joke. But if conditions are good, it makes things marginally better because the high bands are shorter. So from Florida, generally at the bottom of the cycle, you make almost no QSOs on 15, and you don't even go to 10. You work 20 and 40, and it's basically a two-band contest. You might go on 80 for a little bit, for an hour, but it's almost all 20 and 40. When conditions are good and the flux is really high, you can get on 15 and you can work guys in W4, you can work guys in, W8. That area, if you get on 15 or even 10 meters, you can work all of those guys on the high bands, and that's really good. And then there's the portal of anecdote is not data, but my best ever score as a multi-op, we started the contest on 15 meters because the band sounded really good, and in 3 hours we had worked every section. We finished a clean sweep, which was I think 82 that year. But that was at the top of the last cycle in 2015, or near the top of the last cycle. So if you listen to 15, this is not going to be true in a few years, but if you listen to 15 and all you hear is like a VE7 or a W6, then, work those guys and then go to 20 or 40. But if you hear some guys in the Midwest, if you hear some guys in W1, that's a signal that the high bands are going to be in really good shape, and you'll be able to make some QSOs there. We touched on this a little bit. Which bands are best for sweepstakes? A lot of it depends on where you are. If you're in Ohio, it's 40 meters, and maybe 80 meters is a distant second. In California, it's 15 meters. In the low sunspot years, the guys in California will work 15, and they'll, some of them might make they might make 800 or 900 Qs on 15 and 300 Qs on all the other bands. In high sunspot years, they might do that, they'll be more split evenly, but they'll be on 10 and 15. From the Caribbean, from KP4, from KP2, 15 and 20. Florida or the Northern Caribbean, is 20 and 40 meters. There's no, as I touched on it before, don't feel like you've got to be loud on every band. You need to have a pretty good presence on 20 and 40. And, you don't need a ton of horsepower to do it, but those are the bands that you need to be. If you don't know where to go and you're wondering, am I on the right band? Go try 20 and 40. And then this is a digression. I bring this up all the time, and I thought maybe Lou would join us, but he's not. He's out. And N4PN is unfortunately a silent key. So this was the bottom of cycle 23. So, take that as it will. Lou and Paul were battling it out every year in sweepstakes sideband in low power unlimited, which that happened to be Paul's favorite category, and Lou, was trying to beat him. And Lou operated for a couple of years from home without Lou doesn't have a big station. He's got a tri-bander at 40 feet and wires. And he said, God, I beat him on every band. I beat him on the high bands. I beat him on 20. I beat him on 40. I just can't beat him on 75 meters. He's kicking my butt on 75. He'll make 350 Qs on 75 meters. And I struggle to make 100. And, I'm just not, how do I improve my 75 meter numbers? How do I make a better, how do I get a better signal on 75 meters so I can finally beat him? And I talked about it. I mean, I wasn't the only one that he asked this question to, and I wasn't the only one to give him this advice. But I said, look, you need to work less 80 meters. You need to be on 40 when he's on 80, and you need to be on 20 when he's on 40, and you need to be absolutely just kicking his butt on those bands, and it won't matter. He can, he'll make his 300 Qs on 80 or on 75, and you'll make, he'll make those 300 there. You'll make 400 between 20 and 40, and you'll beat him. And he was able to do it. That's the advantage that we have of being further south. So a little bit further south means our 80 meter one hop zone is a lot of the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of the Atlantic Ocean, not prime territory for sweepstakes. His one hop on 80 meters was into like, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, he's really loud into those areas where there's a lot of guys on for sweepstakes. And, we're really loud into like, South Texas and Louisiana, and, it's not as helpful. So now the real question, unless you're a real diehard, which the number of those real diehards in sweepstakes is shrinking all the time, it's a real pain in the neck. I mean, you have to really be fired up to operate. And K4XS, for many, many years was bridesmaid and didn't even win for his Trouble the Division plaque. He was the bridesmaid to KE3Q operating at WP3R in Puerto Rico in phone sweepstakes. And I think 7 or 8 years in a row, Bill finished second overall and second in the division to WP3R. So how can you enjoy it? Because it's, I'm not making it sound super exciting. I think there's 2 ways that you can figure out how to enjoy it. So in the first model, you just operate when the rates are good. So you operate the first 3 or 4 hours, and then you stop, and if the rate starts to slow down, just pull the plug and you come back Sunday evening, because there's still all of these, just a bunch of guys to get on. And your rate is never going to fall very low. You won't make a ton of Qs. You might make, doing this, you might make 400, 500 Qs, more if you've got an amp, and a bigger station. But, with wires, I've done this from home. And I made 400 Qs in about 6-7 hours. I operated at the very beginning of the contest, I operated Sunday night. So you can generate some pileups. You can do, it's a good way to have fun if you don't have a huge station. The second model is just stop when it stops being fun. So you make plans to operate full time, as if you're going to operate full time. And so you go the first 7 or 8 hours with no breaks. You want to go past midnight to 1 a.m. at least. You come back before church on Sunday, you'll catch a few people. And then the rest of the time you just come back and you operate in little half-hour chunks. And you'll learn that the rate drops when the NFL games kick off. So you sit those out. And I'll note, because the population of stations in the contest is finite, this is not one of those contests where somebody's going to have a score that's 20 or 25% better. Like the winning guy is not going to be 25% better than the number two guy. They're going to be pretty close. So, you can this is a way to turn in a pretty competitive score. You can turn in a big score, probably not, certainly not a top 10 score, probably not a division winning score or anything, unless you're in the right category, but, a pretty respectable score. The other model, which I didn't type a slide up, is, to operate full time. I mean, this is a contest and we're in a pretty good spot geographically where you can make a bunch of QSOs, leverage, be on the right band at the right time, leverage our advantage on 20 and 40. Our skip zone on 20 and 40 is the most populous parts of the country. It's like Chicago, Cleveland, that sort of arc through W3 and W8 and W9, which is the biggest sort of pool of potential sweepstakes operators, is right in our sweet spot for on 20 and 40. So you can really do a good job, and you just put up with, you acknowledge that you're going to have some really good hours, and you're going to have, on Sunday, you're going to be really dragging some hours through there. So, but
what is NFL?
Yeah, Northern Florida. If you NFL, the NFL is, whether or not you subscribe to it for, any number of reasons yourself, still the most popular spectator sport in the country. So and there will be a lot of sweepstakes guys who are sort of casual, but they get on Sunday, but they're not going to miss their NFL game. So these are the questions. This is my take on the questions that get asked either before or usually after sweepstakes every year, and the classic one that gets debated ad nauseum, and I think, quite frankly, is a little bit overblown, is, well, I don't remember my check, or, I don't like my check, or I want to change my check because, everybody's used to me always sending 73, and this year I want to send 72 instead, or whatever. Just use a check, use whatever you like. If you have a neat check, or, you're operating, like we're putting the white call signs on the air, W1CW and W1YL and K4OJ. We're using their checks, which are sort of unique. W1CW is check 38, W1YL check 46, and K4OJ's check 70, which is not all that rare. But there's no multiplier for working an unusual check, and nobody comes behind you and looks. But so you can use any check you want. If you want to trip up the people who are using history files and who are not really copying the exchange, you can use a different check. No problem. I will endeavor to copy the correct check when people send it to me, and if there's a different one, then I'll fix it. Related, should you rely on history files? No. It's not a typing contest. It's a copying contest. It's a radio contest. So if you use the history files to save you the typing, I think that they're perfectly legitimate and a good way to do that. It's too easy. It's easy a lot of times to just fall into this rhythm of, well, that's what it says in the history file, so that's probably right. And you log it, and you either convince yourself that that's what you heard, or you you don't really listen to what what they send you, and you just type it in, and
Remember the year of the Virgin Islands, Puerto
oh yeah,
Rico?
yeah, that's a good example. So this was what, 4 or 5 years ago. Um, Nobody was on from Puerto Rico or KP2, which are two sections, until the Sunday in the contest, and NP2X, K9VV, and it was NP4Z, I guess. They got on from home, both of them QRP, but they switched call signs. So NP2X was in Puerto Rico, and NP3Z or KP3Z, which is Felipe's club call, was in the Virgin Islands, and they were both QRP, and it caused a lot of heartburn, and a lot of guys, thought they got a sweep because they finally, worked the KP2 or KP4 or both, and it turns out they didn't work either one. So don't rely on the history files. That was Fred and Felipe being, a little bit cute. I mean, I don't want to defend that and say that that was, super noble or anything, but it was, a good lesson. Which sections are going to be rare? I don't know. VY1 is almost always rare. But VO1 can be rare. Santa Barbara can be rare. It's a toss up. There are some sections that don't have a lot of people in them. There are sections that, um, have a lot of people, but just for whatever reason don't have a lot of sweepstakes entrants. It's really hard to tell, and it's hard to time. You hear stories. I've heard stories before. Uh, South Florida will be really rare in CW sweepstakes. N4BP, who's a beacon from there. He operated from the Virgin Islands. This has been now probably 15 years ago. And there was nobody else who was on and serious from South Florida. And so in phone sweepstakes, I went to South Florida because I thought, everybody will be so thankful. And I would work people and they'd say, "Oh man, you're like the ninth South Florida guy that I've worked in the contest. Where were you all in CW?" So, well, I was in North Florida, but whatever. Um, what sections are rare? I don't know. Nobody knows. And anybody who says they know, they're probably not telling you the truth. Where should I look for the VY1 or the VO1 or KP4 or whatever? I mean, on phone, I happen to know this from W4LT, who is Cuban. 14250, if you speak Spanish or can fake your way through a little bit of Spanish, you can go to 14250, and there's usually some KP4s hanging out there, and you can call them in Spanish and maybe talk one of them through the exchange. But I don't really know any secrets, where you're going to find VY1 or VO1 or anything like that.
I can give you a secret.
I'd like that.
So if you're not assisted and you haven't gotten your sweep and you're starting to panic, open up your bandwidth to about 3 kilohertz and just find a pileup, and that's probably a rare mult.
Yeah. Um, you know, uh,
Chris, one of the things I had done from Mid-Atlantic on VO1 or even something like North Dakota is early in the morning, 20 meters. And remember, VO1's on a half-hour time zone, but you can do that. And I guess be sure to understand how many sections are in Atlantic Canada now. Isn't it now 3 sections?
they keep adding them. I can't remember. I can't keep track of it.
Yeah, and then GTA has some other cute name. Was it Golden Triangle or something? Golden.
I think it's Golden Horseshoe.
Yeah.
Greater Toronto area.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
It
that's
used to be
obsolete.
GTA, and they changed it to GH now.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
Yeah, GH Golden Horseshoe is the western end of Lake Ontario.
yeah,
And that's what they're going to be sending, GH?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad you told me.
And they did, Ray's right. They did break up what used to be the maritime section. So now VO1 and VE9 and
VE1
VE1 are each their own section. So
and
you'll have,
VY2, right?
yeah, and VY2 that's right. VY2. That's the the George Briggs rule, which he didn't get to take advantage of a great deal. So, so where do you look for them? You know, VY1, if particularly this year with conditions pretty good, VY1's probably going to be on 15 at the beginning of the contest. So it's, you know, but you can run it down. And then how do the winners operate differently to the rest of us? Well, you know, they're in the chair the whole time. They're tuning almost always with two radios the whole time. You know, or they, I should say, they're not necessarily tuning, but they're listening to two bands at the same time. They're not listening to themselves in the exchange. They understand the population of QSOs is finite in this contest more than in most contests, and so every time you can work somebody accurately and get them in the log, that's saved you the trouble of working that, you know, that person later or never working them again. So they're really focused and really intense. This is a contest where the tendency on Sunday particularly is to sort of zone out, you know, and you know, turn on the TV, watch football, you know, whatever else while you're just pushing the CQ repeat button. And you'll find that you know, N2IC and N9RV and the guys who are winning this contest every year, W7WA on phone and those guys, you will I suspect you will not find them watching a lot of football on Sunday. You know, this is a contest, you know, that they're going to be really intense, sort of uncomfortably intense, in order to put that sort of score together.
Yeah, they should be working Northern Florida instead.
Exactly. They should be looking for their 23rd North Florida QSO instead. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? You know, any other sort of secret tricks that you've uncovered? Anybody, you know, happy to take it, feedback.
Yeah, so you mentioned what, three different operating models for the ones who are not necessarily trying to win. What about just aiming for a clean sweep and call it a day? I mean, that could be an interesting goal, right?
Yeah. You'll find there's 4 or 5 guys every year who they want to get on and work 85 and 85. So, or this year it's 85, and previous years it's 80 or 82 or whatever. So just one QSO per section, and then they, you know, after they work that section, then they don't work anybody else. That's a good exercise in search and pounce and in your patience to sort of tune through and try to find all the sections calling CQ. And it certainly is possible. There's a lot of variability, I'll say, in how quickly the sweep is attainable. A lot of it depends on, you know, when those sections get on the air and how many of those sections get on the air. The rare one is going to be, I mean, you know, spoiler alert, VY1 is rare. It's, you know, I don't know if you've looked at a map, there's not a lot going on up there and it's really cold. So VY1JA, who was the beacon from up there, Jay is in his 80s and he's got a lot of health problems. And my understanding is that he is not going to be on this weekend. So there's a younger guy, VY1 Charlie Oscar, who's a policeman of some variety, in VY1.
Well, he's the boss up there.
I'm sorry?
The boss. I mean, his call is commanding officer.
Yeah.
Have you seen his website? He's got all the guys doing a parade and it's snowing.
Yeah, he's I think he's a Mountie. Anyway, he's I think he'll be on. He's not a super great CW operator, but he's got a fairly good station. So he'll be on from VY1. He'll be almost certainly the only one. So you'll have to find him and work him. But you know, because of when this contest starts, they almost always start on 15 meters, and you know, you can check packet or just tune around for a big unruly pileup, and that'll probably be him.
Is this a contest where you have to slow down so they can copy you?
That's an interesting question. My experience is on Saturday, no. In fact, the opposite. I go faster. I want to push the speed on Saturday. On Sunday, yes. And there are guys who say on Sunday afternoon when you're not working anybody anyway, slow down to 20 words a minute or even maybe a little bit slower. And, try to get some of these because if you can draw some incremental CW curious person who's maybe, only good to 18 words a minute. If you can draw them in and work them and they send you their number one or number two, that's an incremental QSO that you've made over, whoever is your competition. So I think on Saturday, no, the rate is good and the exchange is so long, you don't want to slow down. You don't want to, you lose more than you gain by slowing down significantly on Saturday. You want to, again, you want to go faster than sort of feels comfortable. I mean, I'll go pretty routinely in the mid 30s words, 30 words per minute on Saturday, 34, 35, 36 words a minute. And faster in spots if I think I can get away with it. But on Sunday, yes, that's a very valid strategy. And, again, I hear again anecdotally from people all the time, I slowed way down and I got this call from this guy who was, using a straight key and a, TS 120, and he was just, I was his, fifth CW QSO. I don't really believe that. Like, I don't think that those, people who are new to CW are really seeking out sweepstakes. I don't think it's that kind of contest. It's the exchange is so long and it's kind of intimidating. It's really intimidating if you don't know the code fairly well. On phone, it's a little bit different discipline because, what you want to do, the trick on phone is not so much slowing down your pace of speech, but it's to sound inviting and sound as if, sound welcoming to try to draw people in. So you don't want to talk too fast and sort of run people off and really sound too intense and too fired up on sideband. What you want to do is I've heard it described as you want to sound purposeful. You want to sound like, what's going on. You're in control of this frequency. You want to work guys sort of efficiently, but you're so intense about it that you scare off somebody new. There's a lot more casual guys who are on for phone who you'll talk through the exchange. That's really common on sideband. You'll have somebody call in and they say, you're 5'9" plus 40 here in Bug Tussle, Arkansas. What do you need from me? And you say, well, Cletus, how many, have you made any other QSOs with any contesters this afternoon? And I was like, no, sir, you're my first one. You'd say, okay, how much power are you running? And that's when the jokes start, say, well, I'm peaking about 750 watts, but, then, when I really get after it, it's probably more like 1124 watts, or something like, they give these really imprecise answers. And you say, okay, what year were your first license? Well, I think it was in the Nixon administration, and I call it 1971. I don't know. So they, but it's really common on phone to talk people through it. And, some of the jokes, some of them are more jokey than others, but that's really uncommon. I've done CW sweepstakes recently, a lot more than I've done phone sweepstakes. And I can't remember a time when I've talked somebody through the exchange on CW. I mean, if they're on, they know the exchange or they figure it out. So slow down for people who are maybe less sure themselves, somebody like that. But I mean, I really don't think there's a ton of people who are, sort of CW curious who are going to be in sweepstakes CW as opposed to another CW contest where the exchange is simpler. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question. My apologies. I'm going to stop the screen share because it's the end of the presentation and we'll get back to